Okay, welcome to the Jenkins X office hours. Not too much on the agenda today. We've got a bit of a demo and a discussion about some of the work we've been doing around Jenkins X3 with Terraform Cloud as well. So we're going to try a little demo of that as well. Pretty much it's all full systems go on Jenkins X3 really. So the alpha is tracking on quite nicely. Me and James were talking just the other day, right? We were talking about like the activity on Slack is really great. People are really getting involved. There's been some fantastic feedback and people helping out in contributions. I know that Ankit and who's the chap? Simone, sorry. Simone. They're doing a load of EKS stuff at the moment, aren't they? Around Jenkins X3, which is fantastic to see.
I've almost got, by the way, an on-premise installation of Jenkins X, because a common question we get is, I want to install on-premise and I don't have Amazon or Google or Microsoft or whatever. It's not quite there yet, but it's close. I think for the next office hours, I'll be able to demo it.
Awesome. Yeah, and so what are you, I mean, I know bits of it, but just to eke a little bit more out of you. So one of the struggles around like container registries and things like that, right, for on-premise, because we don't know what people are using, but we want to have some kind of sensible default extension points so people can kind of plug in their own things. So have you been looking at that? Yeah,
so for Google, Amazon, Microsoft, we have the Terraform stuff, which is awesome. So if you're using a public cloud, Terraform is the way to go to set up all the cloud infrastructure. If you're not using any of those three things, life's a bit more complicated. And we've always struggled with using Jenkins X either on Minikube, on just vanilla Docker, or on an arbitrary on-premise cluster. And it turns out it's really quite complicated building container images on-premise inside a Kubernetes cluster without a container registry which has TLS and DNS. And it's just a big hot mess. And then I just thought the weekend, why don't we just use GitHub's container registry and use that by default? So if you just have an arbitrary Kubernetes cluster and you want to install Jenkins X, why don't we just use that by default? And it turns out it works amazingly well, and I'm kind of kicking myself for not using this earlier. And the beautiful thing about the GitHub container registry is you can use the same GitHub user and token. So I've pretty much got promotion working in an on-premise Kubernetes cluster. To test it out, I just clicked on gke, the create Kubernetes cluster button, and just install Jenkins X with provider Kubernetes. So there's nothing GCP specific, there's no workload identity, there's no GCR, there's no buckets or anything. The only thing I've hit is, well, the same's happened with Docker.io as well. The idea of anonymous pulling and pushing of images is kind of over. So you can't pull images that you've created on Docker Hub anymore, or GitHub registry, without specifying an image pull secret, which is fine. It's just we've never integrated image pull secrets terribly well up to now in Jenkins X. We've been able to cheat with Google and with Amazon by using workload identity, or the Amazon equivalent, to be able to push and pull to the registry, which saves a lot of pain. So I'm just trying to get image pull secrets integrated everywhere. We've got promotion working, but we just previews are slightly more complicated, which is why I'm looking at Helm file previews. Once that's working, we should be laughing. We should have an out-of-the-box, easy install of on-premise Kubernetes, assuming you have GitHub access. That's the only kind of thing, which is going to be awesome, because the amount of people we see pop by Slack and they have some random Kubernetes cluster from somewhere, it could be anywhere, on-premise, DigitalOcean, something. It'd be really nice to say, hey, start with GitHub as a container registry, get everything working, and then people can then try other registries and other configurations and whatnot. So it's close, it's close. So I'll do a demo of that next office hours if anyone's interested, because it should be working by then, I hope.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that'd be great. Okay.
How's it going with Terraform, James?
Well, just make a good segue into that. Thank you, James. Yeah, so we've been looking at, so there was some great work before earlier on the year to making some Terraform modules for Jenkins X2 for around Google, for GKE and for EKS, as well as, and AKS is underway as well. Well, I think one of the things with Jenkins X3, where we focused around the improvements around the actual installation and making things a lot more declarative, a lot less magic, having clearer lines about where everything is, so that we understand that it's easier to debug and easier to maintain as well. And yeah, quite frankly, I think we've had quite a lot of success and a lot of good feedback, and people coming up saying that the experience around Jenkins X3 so far has been better because it's a little bit more declarative up front of what's happening, which is great. So what we've done is looked at taking the existing Terraform modules and looking to see how we can really kind of improve that initial getting started experience, so that kind of reduce the barrier to entry for Jenkins X. Terraform is fantastic, open source project. We love most things that come out of HashiCorp, quite frankly. And the plugin system they've got there with different providers is really quite extensible, and it hangs together quite nicely. One of the things we started looking at more recently was Terraform Cloud. Now, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Terraform Cloud. Let me share my screen a second. Let's see. Let's go into, come down here. Let's just give away my diagram and show you. Terraform. So back to the main website, you can actually log in, sign up for free. It seems a bit odd using a service, a SaaS service for an installation for Jenkins X. Now, this isn't the only way you would be able to install Jenkins X. Of course, you can continue to manually install using the existing docs that are out there as well, or maybe tie into any other CI infrastructure that you might have. But Terraform Cloud kind of solves a lot of the initial setup of problems that people may run into. So it's really quite interesting to look at this. So let's sign in. I think there's a free tier for Terraform Cloud. I think you get the first 5 seats for free, for example, which even on a lot of projects, a lot of DevOps teams, that's fairly quite substantial anyway, to be honest. What we have is this Terraform Cloud. So it's kind of quite cool. It's similar to other CI systems we might see. You have workspaces where you can actually import a Git repository, and that points to the Terraform plans, the modules that we're actually building out for Jenkins X. We'll do a little bit more of a demo shortly around this one. But what we're looking at to do is how we can leverage Terraform Cloud and other projects and other services in the ecosystem, so that Jenkins X is actually a little bit more smaller. We're actually reusing more kind of industry recognized efforts, so that Jenkins X isn't quite as big and complicated as it's possibly been in the past. We want to kind of reduce those lines, which means we even have a diagram. I did have a diagram. Let's see if that can come back. So it's a very simple diagram, but it is aiming just to kind of give some kind of concept or something to understand where we're trying to draw these lines. So with Jenkins X3, we're completely focused around kind of having these lines around cloud infrastructure. And for anything else that Jenkins X installation needs to be successful. Now, cloud infrastructure, but also secrets management. We did for a little while, I think when Jenkins X first started, it was kind of file-based. You kind of did an installation, but then all the secrets on your local machine. If you need to do another upgrade, for example, then the person that actually did the initial installation had to do the upgrade and have the secrets in the same place, which obviously isn't terribly great. We then looked at using Vault, put Vault inside the cluster. Putting Vault inside the cluster, an API inside the cluster. Obviously, it had storage with the secrets in cloud storage anyway, but it did become a little bit more complicated. If, say, you deleted the cluster, you have to restore services as well. And there's a lot of dependency having an in-cluster accessing your secrets provider, secrets management. So what we want to do is kind of really pull this out as well with Jenkins X3 and make it extensible, so you can actually plug in any kind of secrets management service that's out there. There is a couple out there already. There's Google Secrets Manager, which I'm a big fan of. It makes things super simple when you're working on GCP. You can still use workload identity to access your secrets and write secrets as well. And you've got the Amazon version of this as well. You know, you have these ways that you want other people are going to have different ways, different implementations to be able to manage their secrets. So what we're trying to do is really draw these lines of cloud infrastructure using management, using Terraform initially, but sure going forward we use other things as well. And then secrets management, where I think James has demoed before talking about external secrets, which is a nice abstraction to be able to populate a cluster, a Kubernetes secret from any of these secret management services. So once we've got these two here, the kind of the base of the platform, it becomes a lot easier for a Jenkins X installation to be layered on top of this and be more successful. So going over to the docs, this is kind of where we are at the moment, and we're going to need, again, this is kind of still work in progress. People have been helping out, which has been great, get involved. At the moment, the main docs we've got are around using Google Container Engine, Terraform and Vault. So we've got some Google Secrets Managers with docs that are going to be going in soon. Same for the EKS, the Amazon version as well. And the idea is you're creating these Git repositories up front that has the infrastructure for Terraform, and a separate Git repository which has all the Kubernetes YAML that we actually install for Jenkins X installation. So the idea is we've got a Git repository for our cloud infrastructure and a Git repository for the Jenkins X installation. What I've done just before this, again, we need to kind of tidy these up and get the namings a little bit better and improve the docs, but I've created these are template repositories. So if I go to JX3 Terraform GKE, I can use this template, which I've already done. I've clicked that button, I've tinkered with it a little bit because this is still a bit work in progress. I ultimately have a project here, which has got my module for, which you can see I'm pointing to a custom version of a Terraform module that I'm working on. But this, otherwise than that, is fairly standard. What we're going to do is actually import this into Terraform Cloud, and then we're going to configure Terraform Cloud to also then look at the Jenkins X Git repository that we're going to create, so that we actually then provision, hand over the management of the installation of that cluster over to Jenkins X. So Terraform Cloud will manage the actual cloud resources, and Jenkins X, using a Git operator, will manage the actual installation, all the resources that are actually running inside that Kubernetes cluster. So let's go ahead. This isn't rehearsed, so this may be interesting. So let's go ahead and log in. Let's create a brand new workspace. So I've already hooked this up to my credentials. I'm using a GitHub OAuth application. So I can go in and select GitHub. I should be able to go and find the repo that I've got up here. Let's do that. And you can see that this was generated from the template that I mentioned before. Let's go down. Ooh. Take a couple of spaces. So we're going to create this workspace. Once that's been created, because we're gonna enable Terraform Cloud to be able to provision this, we're going to need to give it some permissions. So I'm going to try and do this a little bit off screen so I don't share any secrets, which is normally what I tend to do in these recorded demos. So, but I'll explain to them as I go along. All right, configure some variables. Let's start showing you some of them. So this is a way that we can actually give, when the Terraform Cloud triggers a Terraform plan and a Terraform apply, we can give it some variables to actually use within that, also some environment variables to actually, so the environment that is performing the plan can actually use. I'll give some examples in a second of that. So let's add a couple of variables. We're going to give it a GCP project. Bear with me whilst I add in a few of these. Right, next we're going to give it a Git URL. You could probably call this something a little bit better, but let's go back to our repositories. We're going to go down to the Google Container Engine Google Secrets Manager flavor, quick start. So let's use this template. Let's put it into a different one. JR test 2. Let's create this repository from our quick starts that we've got. Now this is a specific for Google Container Engine using a secret store of Google Secrets Manager, so not Vault. Up front we've got, this is the Helm file YAML that we've got. When this actually runs, when the installation happens, this is all resolved and committed back. We can have a look at this afterwards during the demo. We'll be able to see all the versions, all the repositories actually generated and committed back into the Git repository. So everything is declarative up front. But this is just a quick start to get us going. All right, so now we've got a, let's have a look. Now we've got a URL. We can go back over here and I can't remember if I need to do, if I need the prefix in there or not. Actually, just give me 1 second. I've got an example here. We've probably got some validation on there anyway, but I just want to double check. Yeah, let's keep it like that. Save variable. We're going to give another variable of a username. People that are familiar with Jenkins X know that to be able to interact with Git repositories and for Lighthouse to be able to do the chat ops commenting and for us to be able to merge requests, merge pull requests when all the requirements are satisfied, we need to be able to have a bot token, which is referred to. So we've got a bot username of Jenkins X Labs bot. Oops. Save variable, and then I'm also going to do a token, which I'll do off screen, but enable sensitive. There we go.
James, did you mix up like the bot name? I think that you entered the wrong one.
Ooh, I made that. Let me check. No, that should be okay, I think. Bot username should be Jenkins X Labs bot.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, no, but thank you though. It do tend to mess things up. All right, so we've got some variables that are set up before. Now let's also add an environment variable, and this is a GCP service account. Again, I'll do this off screen, but something interesting with Terraform Cloud as well. You have to remove all the new lines. So let me do this. Get a service account in Google Cloud Platform, download the JSON key, and then you can actually add that to Terraform Cloud. And these are all encrypted and stored to Terraform Cloud, so we're okay to put these secrets in there. All right, so we've got some Terraform variables and we've got an environment variable so that we can actually create these resources. Terraform has permission to be able to create resources within our GCP project of Jenkins X Labs BDD. All right, so now we can kind of go back and we can queue our plan. This is a manual trigger for the first time. What's kind of cool is very similar to Jenkins X. Once you enable this, actually it registers the webhooks, so you actually get automated CI on the Git repository for your infrastructure. We did look at actually combining the infrastructure repo as the same one as the Jenkins X installation Git repository. The reasons we've split them out is because it tends to suits probably Terraform Cloud a little bit better, and we've figured most business units within organizations, but it's configurable anyway. But the idea is we'll have a Git repository just for your Terraform plan. So all of your infrastructure is managed in one Git repository, and a second Git repository for any of your applications like external DNS or Cert Manager or your own custom applications. There'll be a different Git repository. So, okay, we've got needs confirmation. This is all configurable as well, but it's nice. You can see your plan of the diff that's actually there and confirm and apply. That's going to take a few minutes to run through. And again, one of the slight interesting things is it actually shows your secrets on the screen. So I'm going to close this little tab here. But if you can see, this is very, I guess similar. There was the Jenkins X UI that we had before. This is a lot similar similar to a lot of CI solutions like Circle CI and various others, where we've got this plan, we're verifying, and we've got this window of the logs that are going through and actually tailing the logs here. So it's really quite a very consistent, familiar look and feel. So that's going to go off to our GCP project, and we can probably have a little look at it. And there we go. It's creating the cluster there. It'll take a few minutes. Now, what's interesting, what we're actually looking at doing now is we want to have a handover to Jenkins X, because once the Terraform is finished, that's managing all the state with the Terraform Git repository. But once that's actually all set up, we want to install the Jenkins X3 Git operator, and that will synchronize the changes back and forth from the Git repository for Jenkins X, which is here. So at some point, it's going to take probably 3 or 4 minutes to actually be created. The operator will get installed inside the newly created cluster. All the IAM bindings are all set up, and then we'll see this actually being deployed. We've also got automated secrets being set up into Google Secrets Manager, which we can then change at a later date. But what we're doing here is upfront is automating the setup of absolutely everything via Terraform Cloud, which really kind of really simplifies the initial setup, but it seems to be doing things the right way. We've got our own infrastructure ourselves using Jenkins X3 here that's running. So we're actually dog fooding all of this using Google Secrets Manager as well. And it's got to say, it's a very good look and feel and user experience, that things that I don't want to be running things from my local machine. I want to have something set up and running in the cloud that's managing all of this. So whilst that goes through, I guess, are there any questions that anybody has? Does that make sense?
So in terms of crafting the Jenkins X config, do you have something in mind to simplify that process?
So, for example, the configuration in this Git repository that we fork, yeah? Yeah, so it's certainly we want to be building tooling going forward around this, probably heavily based around the octants, which we're obviously big fans on. James has done some demos before around that. Really simplifying the setup of secrets and also installation of applications like DNS and TLS, for example. One good thing that we're doing is everything is more standardized. So whereas Jenkins X2 was, there was a few, I guess, there was a bit of a custom way to be able to install things. There was charts, but is it an add-on, is it a chart, what's actually being installed? Some things were being programmatically installed via the JX CLI. And we've moved away from that completely. There is no magic going on at all. Everything is Helm file, or anything you want. You could just put blobs of YAML in this Git repository. And when this actually when the Git operator kicks in, gets installed into the cluster, that will generate all the Kubernetes YAML for that Helm file, and then the Git operator will sync that into the cluster. So there's kind of a lot less magic. So we can standardize around things like Helm file and build tooling around that. Right now, if you wanted to add in your own custom ones, then you would add in, extend this Helm file here.
In many ways, the way of configuring charts is vanilla Helm file now. So you edit the Helm file YAML, you can supply a values.yaml file for a specific chart. You can edit the Helm file and override chart values in there if you wish, using the Helm file notation. So it's pretty much vanilla Helm file, really. Probably the other area that's slightly different from vanilla Helm file is the use of Kubernetes external secrets, which is all baked in by default. But if you want to kind of peel back the curtain and understand how it's all working, we're using the Kubernetes external secrets service to map whatever secret store you have, if you have one. Vault, Google Secret Manager, Amazon Secrets Manager, Azure Secret Manager, Alibaba Secret Manager. If you're using a secret manager, external secrets is the thing that maps between the two. And one thing that's new in Jenkins X3 that James is just showing is what Jenkins X3 does is whenever you have a Helm chart that has a secret inside, it turns the secret into an external secret, which is kind of like a reference to a real secret. So that then we can check in the external secrets into Git, and we never check in a secret. And then Kubernetes external secret is a thing that actually makes the real secrets. So Jenkins X never touches a secret, it never creates one, it never messes with them. Kubernetes external secrets is a thing that does that. And to help you configure the mapping between the Kubernetes external secret and Google, Amazon, Microsoft's secret manager or Vault, we've got this little file called a secret mapping, which helps map which common secrets appear in, which Vault path or whatever. If you don't specify a mapping, it tries to do the best default by using the name of the secret and the name of the key in the secret as the place in Vault to put it. But you can specify exactly where in Vault you want things to be, or exactly which Google project you want to pull the secrets from, or whatever it is.
Okay, and are you templating the values in JX requirements from the Terraform, or does that have to be manually synchronized at the moment?
That's a great question. There's two parts to this. One is, how do we take data from Terraform and inject it into Helm, or kubectl, or Kustomize, or Kept, or whatever it is you're using. And then the other part is, one thing I should mention, we have secret templating, which is not that common, but there are some secrets that you want to do templating on. I'll give you a few examples. Your docker config.json, you often want to specify many Docker registries, which each have a username and password. The biggie is Maven settings. Well, the same is true of NPM as well. If you have a Maven settings file, it's a massive hunk of XML with a bunch of secrets in there for different registries and whatnot. So that we have some templating for secrets where we can populate an external secret from template values using Go templates. So we use in the secret schema stuff, you can specify in some secrets that will use templating to populate them, which is not that common, but it is useful for things like Docker config and Maven settings. But to your question, Terry, we have currently two mechanisms in version 3. So the version 2 used to output a requirements YAML, and then it would check that into Git, and you'd get this kind of diff problem that Terraform would output Jenkins X YAML, and it would overwrite stuff that's in Git, and it would be a little bit kind of weird. So the first thing we did was write a step, JX GitOps requirements merge, that takes the output from Terraform and does a proper merge into source control, so that it only takes the values that Terraform should be changing, like bucket names and various other things. So we have a proper merge command that properly preserves the stuff that's in Git and the stuff that goes in Terraform. We also, to make it a little bit easier for Terraform to run, say, in Terraform Cloud, you don't necessarily, when we run, okay, let me step back slightly. We have a boot job now in version 3. And the boot job might not have access to Terraform outputs, because we might be running Terraform in Terraform Cloud, or some operator's ops person's place. And the boot job is running in a pod inside Kubernetes, and it might not be able to access all the Terraform stuff. So to simplify that, we've started to use the pattern of, and this is optional and we could turn this on and off, but we output Terraform output to a config map that the boot job can then read. So the merge job reads, in fact, James is showing it. I was way too slow in my explanation. Terraform is outputting a config map, which has the requirements YAML, and then we merge those changes in if they're there. So if Terraform outputs this config map with the requirement stuff, V3 just merges that straight in and uses it, and actually makes that change in Git. So if Terraform ever changes a bucket name, Git is then changed with a pull request and everything. One thing we've been looking at as we've been improving the EKS and AKS Terraform modules is things are slightly more complicated in the Azure space, and in the Amazon space, we sometimes want to output secrets from Terraform, which then get added as annotations to some service accounts. So we've been following a similar pattern, but using a secret instead of a config map, and allowing the Terraform to output arbitrary kubectl commands. So they're a little bit more flexible. So right now, the EKS Terraform module can output a secret with a bunch of kubectl annotate commands to annotate service accounts with Amazon role IDs and various other bits and bobs. So the basic idea is we're trying to define a nice simple contract so Terraform can output data. Whether it's a Terraform output, whether it's a config map, or whether it's a secret, and then the boot job in Jenkins X can take that data and merge it nicely with Git and with Kubernetes. So it's a slightly long, rambling answer. But the quick answer is config maps and secrets seem to be the easiest way of exchanging data between Terraform and the boot job in a way that's more flexible to let different teams run Terraform versus the boot job.
Okay. On JX2, where we would have used to have taken the output and then manually doing a git merge and then a push, you don't need to do that. We've got, because there's the sync operator is a bidirectional syncing, so it takes any configuration changes you've made in the Terraform setup, will actually sync that back in.
Okay, cool. And previously, if you had a problem and the cluster didn't come up as expected, you could modify your config and then rerun boot, and it would usually correct itself.
Yep.
Is there a similar thing that you can do with this, or do you need to nuke and start again?
No, it's well, it's provided the modules have been written well, which up until now they have been. These modules are idempotent. So the idea is that you can actually rerun these many, many times. I know there is some times where I think you can people can get into a bit of a pickle. There is ways to be able to modify the state. I think I've only had that personally once lately, and we'll get some nice how-to guides how to do that with Terraform Cloud, but it's largely things you should be able to just rerun, making changes and rerun.
It's worth saying though that sometimes if you change some things in Terraform, it will recreate your Kubernetes cluster. So if you change like the node pool config or whatever, or the node pool size, Terraform might decide to delete your cluster and recreate it, which could be a bad thing, but we've been doing it a bit ourselves.
Yeah.
Jenkins X will recover fine because it's using Vault storage for the secrets and Git for everything else. So it does everything comes back. The only issue right now is you might lose pipeline activities. So we'd really love to be able to fix that so that if Terraform does completely recreate your cluster, everything kind of comes back again.
Kind of want to almost.
You can enable deletion protection inside Terraform. So on the cluster, you can tell it not to delete unless you actually supply like a CLI argument to force deletion. Lifecycle rules. Which means I don't know how it works. I've never used it with Terraform Cloud, but that's on the SaaS. That's how we used to do that one.
I think it's fairly configurable, so I'm pretty sure we should be able to do that. Well, I've got to be honest. One of the things, it has been quite nice modifying like the machine sizes or the SSD disk thing. This is the common one we keep forgetting, and it just recreates. And all of a sudden, it's just a few minutes later, the cluster's been re-provisioned back, synced back with the Jenkins X Git repository, and it's got all of the repositories, all of the source repositories that you'd imported before. So, like Jay says, the only thing we're actually losing at the moment is any kind of active runtime custom resource like pipeline activity. Maybe we can do stuff out in the future, but it kind of makes you feel a little bit less worried about your clusters disappearing, which in the past. I know people might want to have them more as pets rather than cattle, but it's nice having that option.
It's probably a good thing to like once a week recreate your cluster anyways, like maybe on a weekend or something when there's no developers to run. I'm talking about the dev cluster here, not production is a whole different kind of fish.
I'm fully up for doing in a conference talk at the start, deleting our prod cluster and then and see if we can recover. I think that should be a challenge. Maybe you should try that one, James. I challenge you.
I'm really good at deleting production. I've done it quite a few times already.
So yeah, what's I guess any other? So that's actually worked, which is good to see. It's created the cluster, all the cloud resources, and then it's handed off to Jenkins X sync operator, which is now synchronizing from the from this repository. Here we can see we actually 7 minutes ago the sync operator regenerated some configuration, and these are the things. Okay, it's worked out the domain name, and this is so everything's being pushed back, the bidirectional sync back up to the Git repository. So that's got the state for the installation of the cluster of the Kubernetes resources.
One thing I really, really like about Jenkins X3, like as a user, because I'm using it every day, is whenever you make a change on any of the Git repositories that are for the cluster, the pull request has the actual Kubernetes resources that will change. So the first pull request might not. For example, if you're doing a promotion, the first pull request might just say, use a different version of the Helm chart. But then a pipeline will run on the pull request, which will say, well, actually, these are the images that's going to change, and maybe this other resource is going to change, and maybe a config map changes, and maybe an environment variable changes because the charts change. So you actually see what's really going to change in the diff of Git. I mean, there are tools like Helm diff and Helm file diff and whatnot, which are great, but it's much nicer just seeing everything that's actually going to change on every commit. Because it just gives you that kind of confidence that you know what's actually going to happen. So when you hit merge, you know exactly what's going to be in Kubernetes. You know what resources are going to be there, what secrets are going to be there, what namespaces, and all that kind of stuff, which is really, really nice.
I've got a question for you, James, actually. Any idea what this POW DevOps 2020 is?
Yes.
I've got a feeling that's something to do with you.
Yes. The basic issue is software. Well, there's two problems, but it's all related to the Git config.
Right.
As in the .git config file and the username. And I made a change a while ago that it was using, it was never using the real username from the bot. So it was often using like root or something like that as the username with Git. Yeah. And then GitHub would then associate the email address with a Git user. And that Git user has got the Jenkins X at googlegroups.com email address. And so that's what GitHub thinks. That's who GitHub thinks is doing all these commits, because the email address is wrong.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah, I kind of fixed it, but I've noticed I keep I keep breaking my .git config locally. And so GitHub keeps thinking I'm that person.
Yeah,
I should have a real fix.
Yeah, no, it's just I noticed it. Just checking it wasn't anything like that.
I think it's me.
Are there any other questions around any of this? We'll hopefully get some proper blog and docs up there in a couple of days. We need to get some BDD testing on there as well. So it's pretty much there. It's just tying up these loose ends, which takes a little bit of time, but it's looking pretty good. It's feeling quite good as well. Hopefully it'll be there for people to kind of start kicking the tires in the next few days.
I have just a curiosity question. How often does the Git operator pull your Git repo?
It's configurable. What's the default, James?
It's the environment variable. I think it's like 20, 30 seconds right now, but it's an environment variable you can override with a Helm value.
Just was for killing. Oh, does that help?
But eventually, we could look at using webhooks with the Git operator. It's a slightly long story, though. We wanted the Git operator to be the simplest, easiest thing for production. So you might not have webhooks, you might not expose production over the internet, so GitHub might not be able to see it. So we wanted something that could work anywhere, right? It could work on your laptop, it could work in production. It didn't need TLS, it didn't need a public URL. It didn't need, whatever. So which is why it's polling by default. We could combine Lighthouse and Tecton with the Git operator so that if you have webhooks, it immediately triggers. We just haven't done that bit yet. So right now it polls every kind of like 20, 30 seconds.
Cool. Right then, well, let's leave that there. That's just destroying now as well. Seem to be, personally, I'm a bit of a fan of Terraform Cloud. Check it out. The Terraform folks seem to be pretty active on their community as well. So I'm sure we'll reach out to them as well. But it seems to be solving quite a lot of the initial setup problems or UX possibly that we can foresee sometimes people running into. And that with that taken care of, it helps Jenkins X be a bit more focused about what Jenkins X is supposed to be doing. So yeah, feels much better.
So when are we going to have a multi-cluster demo with Terraform Cloud, creating like 3 clusters with one Terraform?
Well, see, I'm debating. Well, maybe. So Gareth, I'll go pick on you here. Where do you think? Where James is coming from is a single Terraform plan, but create 3 different separate clusters for a multi-cluster kind of setup. I was wondering, I was debating in my head if that was what most people would do. Would they have it in different GCP projects and have almost a workspace for each cluster?
Yeah, I mean, I think a more realistic scenario would be different projects. Keeping your, you'd keep your dev as far away from your production stuff as possible. And if you're running multi-clusters, you're probably going to want different Terraform providers because they'll, or not different Terraform, but different Terraform configs because they'll get applied with different service accounts and things like that. I would have thought.
That's what I was thinking, because you need to have the environment variable you do that on the workspace level. So that's what unless you give one service account which can write to all of them, which is probably a bit of a no-no, I guess. But I guess once we do that though, James, to come back to it, if we haven't, hopefully not too far, but if we could do a multiple workspace one, it's just reinstalling things, maybe there's a couple more manual efforts, or maybe we could automate it because there's an API to do this as well. But then we can also do the promotion for Docker images as well through to different GCRs. That'd be because that seems to be a bit of a missing piece for people.
It would be nice if at some point you could share one Git repository with folders or something across different Terraform things. So, because right now you have to create, let's say you want 5 clusters to do a demo. You'd have 5 Git repositories. You'd have to import into Terraform Cloud 5 times. It'd be kind of nice if there's a way of batching that somehow so that you could set up, multiple projects and service accounts and everything.
I'm of the opinion. Yeah, I know. It's more just like demo stuff, though, isn't it? I don't know. It's. Well, I guess if people, maybe we could do that for demo things. But I get the feeling that people will go to the lengths of it if it's repeat or something. People are going to be okay with it, maybe. But maybe we can do some UX around setting those things up initially, like n number of requirements, and then it just uses the API to be able to spin them up. Get the service accounts or something, different service accounts maybe. Yeah, okay. Soon then, to answer your question, probably. All right, so there's, 12 minutes left. Anybody else have any questions at all?
I've got a question. I know this is probably like 6 months ago that there was a bit of an effort to get Jenkins X running on ARM.
Yeah.
What happened with that? And do you know what the current state of that is?
Yeah, I don't know, Cara, do you want to?
Well, the good folks, Futureway and Naro are working with us to actually port Jenkins X on ARM. So that work is ongoing. And in fact, within the CDF Slack, there is an open Slack channel So you're more than welcome to join that section, Gary.
Cool.
And your contributions would be very welcome. Was there any particular use case? Was there something that you had in mind, or it's just curiosity question?
I was just wondering on it, that whether or not, or how much effort it would be to port across, and yeah, whether or not it would run on that.
There's been they've been going for a couple of weeks really. I've just popped the channel, the CDF channel in the chat. The team are working on it. What we've already started doing with Jenkins X3 binaries is building the ARM equivalent in that Go releaser. What they're also looking at doing is actually running inside the Docker images ARM versions of them as well. So like Lighthouse, using ARM version, but using a base image of ARM. So they're looking at starting with Terraform, Tecton, got Terraform on the mind, Tecton and Lighthouse. So that's where they're starting with. And what we figured was, hopefully by the time they've got that there, then Jenkins X3 hopefully should be maybe close to beta, and they'll actually go use that. They've got infrastructure set up and everything, so that we can access it, which has been great. So it'd be worth having a little peek. Ideally, we'll actually have a BDE test as well, which should call out and run on their infrastructure too, which should be quite cool. Cool. Alrighty. There we go. I can see that. Anything else from anybody? Okay, should we leave it there then? We'll ping out the docs that we actually get up on the alpha site soon, how to get going with Google Secrets Manager and also the Terraform Cloud. Give it a go, it feels quite good. Obviously we're looking for feedback as well. And then hopefully next week there's going to be a bit more of a focus on some of the expected other Helm charts that people use, but for their default production setups like DNS, like TLS. So that's going to be hopefully early next week. Following on from that, I think there's an effort around actually a bit more insight into how the installation is actually behaving. So we're going to be looking at using, there was some work before by Gareth and folks around KubeHealthy as well. So we want to be understanding how is the installation, Jenkins X installation working, and getting some nice visualizations into Octant as well. So that's kind of coming up. Awesome. If there's nothing else from anybody, we'll pick it up in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll get an on-premise demo, a JX3 on-premise demo from James. Sounds good. All right then.
Awesome.
Take care, everybody. Cheers. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.